Thanks, Meg. So for those who just heard that, we are going to record this session. We had a lot of requests beyond the 80 or so who registered. We received dozens of emails from people asking if this could be recorded and that a recording be shared following. So we are keen to do that. Hopefully everyone's okay with that. So if you, because of that, knowing that you want your camera off, then feel free. But if you're comfortable to have your camera on, it's the warmth and personal connection is lovely. And just, yeah, as I was sharing, it was so fun to look at that list this morning to see. It really is a great representation of the diversity of the Colt community, from Ocean Week Canada event hosts to funding partners and core operation partners to some of our featured artists to early career research interns, some international colleagues and friends, advisory board members. It's a really lovely sampling and mix of the Colt community. So really thrilled to see that and very grateful for everyone taking the time. And we certainly know that between the overloaded inboxes and the many demands and needs and pulls of your various organizations and community groups and what have you. Time is precious. So thanks for being here today with us and leaning in. Really, really grateful. So Meg, I'll just check in with you. Where are we at in terms of waiting room and thumbs up to get rolling?
Yeah, I think we can get rolling. There's still people trickling in, but I'll keep admitting them as they come.
Okay, fantastic. Well, formal and official, welcome everyone. My name is Diz Glithero, and I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition. I see a ton of familiar faces. There may be a couple that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person, but lovely to see you all. And I'm joining you today from the shores of the Tyangandine Zibi River in the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin people. Lucky to live here in Chelsea, Quebec, and this river and the land where I am living has provided me an incredible place to live, work, raise a family, and I certainly each day recognize the privilege to do so is based on the care by those who have looked after this place for millennium. So grateful to be here, and it's nice to see some of the people sharing the territories and places from which they are from, and connections to. So let's move to the next slide and dive in as to what the intention of this webinar is and the milestone that it marks. In terms of back in 2021, when we launched the national strategy, we had made a commitment back then that at the end of 2024, start of 2025, we would take a look at, where are we at, what's been achieved, where is the momentum, and to come together to create an input process as a community to shape an updated or a revised strategy to guide us through the second half of the ocean decade. So today's webinar kicks off that process. And it's the first of many opportunities or pathways which we'll be gathering input from the community. The plan for today is 30 minutes or so of a presentation to kind of walk you through the past few years and what has been done and achieved and by who, to give a sense of where we're at. But then in the next 30 minutes to really turn it over to all of you through an interactive Slido opportunity where we've got 6 questions that we'd love to explore and just gather these first kind of initial insights from members of the community. In terms of outputs from the webinar, along with the recording that we'll be doing, there'll also be a graphic recording that's happening, so we'll share that after. The same 6 questions that we're going to be exploring through Slido today or in the chat if you prefer. Those have been already put into what we've called a community input survey. So the same 6 questions, and immediately after this webinar, we'll be sharing that out to the broader community. But it's also an opportunity for you who are leaning in today that I'd imagine the kind of conversation and what you hear in the presentation and some of the things shared in Slido as a community today on this webinar might spark further reflection, and you too will then have a link to that input survey. So if you want to add anything further or dive deeper into the 6 questions we explored today, you'll have time over the coming weeks to do that. And in terms of just a few housekeeping, yeah, I encourage it for those who just came as we got it started, just please cameras on if comfortable with that, mics off. And between the Slido, the chat, and the raise the hand function, when we get to the interactive portion, there's many ways to engage and contribute. So we welcome all forms. All right, next there, Meg. So here we go, the speed tour of 3 years. We kicked off when Kolk launched in the late fall of 2018. It was around a single purpose, and that purpose was to design and lead a national study. And that study was really to explore, what does the term ocean literacy mean in Canada? Who's doing what? In what way? What approach? With who? What were we seeing as strengths and weaknesses? And ultimately, what were we seeing, despite the regional and cultural and diversity across the country? What were we collectively seeing as some common priorities? Next slide. We then took all those common priorities, and that's what directly informed and shaped the national study that was launched in March of 2021. That study kind of catapulted Canada into a leadership role in terms of ocean literacy, as we were the first country to create a national ocean literacy strategy. And that strategy was built around 3 goals that at the time we really saw as the dimensions of ocean literacy. So knowledge, values, and action, knowing that all of those were an important element to ocean literacy. And it was built around 9 action streams, all of which directly linked to the set of common priorities that came out of the national study. You'll see here a 10th one was added, and that was happened during the course of the first year. Because of the momentum on an international level, all of a sudden there was a need to start to track kind of our leadership role beyond the 9 action streams. Next slide, please, Meg. So in terms of the initial, like the objectives of that initial strategy, it was really around to try and connect the dots. There was a lot of good work happening, but it was fragmented. In places it was duplicated, or there was just an awareness of who was doing what in different regions. So it created an incredible opportunity to co-develop a collaborative framework for action, to figure out ways to work together more, to build relationships, and really to generate momentum at the start of the ocean decade. There was intention around launching, doing all that groundwork right before the onset of the decade, so that we as a community would be mobilized and ready to hit the ground running when the decade started. Next slide, please. In terms of implementation, at the time of building that national strategy and launching it, we envisioned that there'd be 2 ways that we would start to implement the strategy. And we were keeping in mind that national scope and that on-the-ground community scope, because both are essential. And we thought on the national scope that we would mobilize action teams or national working groups around each of the action streams. And on the ground, in a more community level, we created what we called COAST, and it was a tracker for people to kind of opt in and share their initiative or activity that they were doing. And we would be able to kind of monitor those over time. Well, very quickly, neither worked that well. So best laid plans, and we had to pivot. And we really pivoted around where the momentum was and where the leadership was starting to galvanize. Meg, next slide, please. And to build on more in terms of how we pivoted, what was quite clear within the first 6 to 12 months of implementing the strategy was that those 10 action streams were not apples and apples. Some of them were just very operational, like the first one. We needed platforms to communicate. We needed the websites, the back-end pieces that allowed the community to self-organize. Others were really tangible initiatives like Ocean Week Canada. Let's start this, let's grow this. We could all kind of see it. It was very tangible and palpable, and quite quickly, hundreds of organizations mobilized around it. And then others were really broad, really big, life work, cross-cutting themes. So you could start to see like it wasn't, in terms of the ease of implementation, wasn't clear. Next slide, please. We also started to realize that as we were socializing and kind of building momentum around the uptake of the national strategy in those early years, it was a lot for people to remember 10 action streams, even us working within the project office. So we quickly pivoted it to creating 3 priority areas, or what we call kind of impact themes. And those were education and engagement, research and impact, leadership and advocacy. And then under each one, started to place the key initiatives that were helping to drive and advance those priority areas. So we still maintain, we're still looking at those action streams, but we packaged them in a different way. It was really aided with communication and with people being able to sink their teeth into it. Next slide, please. And in terms of as these key initiatives started to take shape and the community started to organize itself, we also were reminded and really attentive to that these key initiatives, although they're fun to be doing, we love the work that we do. They came out of the national study. They were evidence-based, evidence-led, and so we needed an impact measurement program to see, is any of this early work and efforts starting to make a difference, and in what ways? And grateful for the leadership of EntreMission. I believe the CEO, Kristen Tully, is joining us today. EntreMission's a Montreal-based social enterprise with over 25 years of experience in supporting organizations and initiatives around strategic planning, impact measurement, and communication infrastructure and what have you. So it was really under the leadership of that team, working collectively with us and core partners, that we established the framework. And really, it was around a set of metric families and a very iterative process where a resource, be it an event, a toolkit, a publication, some kind of activity, would then engage people. We'd look at the quality and degree and depth of that engagement and what it led to and how that refined everything that we do on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. In terms of, when we saw 452 partners, as we're growing and growing across these key initiatives and who's involved, it's often kind of an abstract or nebulous thing to say, we've got 452 partners, but you see them on a spreadsheet, but what does that really mean? What does it look like? And so we engaged last year in the lead up to this process now, a social network analysis, where we really looked at what does our community look like? How is it self-organizing? And so these next 3 slides are a visual representation of what the community looks like. And so this first slide is looking at around partners and the kind of partners. So when we take our 452 partners, what are the different types and how did they start to move? And so we've got funding partners. The core operational partners are those that if you were to remove one of them, our day-to-day or week-to-week capacity would be impacted. You can see, and the last thing I'll just note to here is like with Ocean Week Canada, huge partners. That is kind of where the biggest momentum is in terms of where community and organizations are leading in. Next slide. We also did social network analysis, looking at it through kind of the cross sections of our key initiatives. So each one of those key initiatives, where were partners organizing? And so again, there's Ocean Week, big. So we can see like that is by far the biggest kind of catalyst in the ocean literacy movement right now. But these other key initiatives are also really interesting to see, like, kind of the next 2 top ones, the community grants program, lots of people mobilizing around that. So you can see that the need for it and interest is there. And if you were to combine some of these ones that are very research focused, like public ocean perceptions research, the actual ocean literacy research community itself, or then you start to see that research is also kind of where we're seeing a lot of momentum. Next slide, please. And then we did a sectoral lens or analysis. And this was neat to see. We used the same sectors that we used in the original national study. And so where in the course of the 3 years from the study and strategy to now 3 years in, where, what is the sector representation looking like? Not surprising to see NGO and education high, but what's really neat to see is the scale of arts and culture groups. Because we know, and we certainly have increasingly learned that artists are in that art science interface, and the storytellers are what build those emotional connections and bring people into ocean conversations. We can also, this type of analysis also helps us to identify where are the gaps, where do we need to do better? And media is a good example because we've learned through public ocean perception research that the number one way that Canadians learn about the ocean is through media. And yet it's the lowest number in terms of our sector that we've been able to galvanize to date in terms of partners. So it tells us a lot about our community, where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, where kind of the key influencers are, and where there's points of intersection that are exciting. Next slide, please. So where has all this work been done by, in terms of this huge community of partners leaning in, what kind of impact has it had to date? So at a very high level glance, when we initially started with that core group who was starting to map out what the national study would look like, we were 10, now 452 unique partners strong. We started with a budget of 150,000 back in 2018, and we've raised over 10 million to date. And we've had over 5 million Canadians directly engaged. So not reach, but directly engaged, like attending an event, downloading a toolkit in a way that we, kind of quantify as like a meaningful engagement. Next slide, please. Now, taking it kind of in a more granular and through a more narrative lens, and I know that Meg S is dropping. We've got two Megs on our team now, Meg and Meg S. So Meg S is dropping into the chat some of those recent impact measurement reports, so you can really dive in and see the numbers and the different kind of those metric families. I quickly acknowledged a few slides back and how they're lining up with each initiative. But this is a helpful or maybe interesting kind of narrative lens around impact over time. And so in 2018, if we look from how ocean literacy was being understood or defined, when we started out, the general and widely accepted definition of ocean literacy was around, my impact on the ocean and the ocean's impact on me, the extent to which I understood that relationship. It then shifted a bit with the strategy. When we did the national study and strategy and we talked to communities and people about ocean literacy, that term did not resonate. What came out was ocean connection, ocean culture, ocean, livelihoods, and all of these different terms. We have got a great word cloud within the initial national strategy that showcases all the different ways we heard, but really it was around relationship. Now I argue like the work that we've done has kind of moved us towards positioning ocean literacy as a societal outcome. It's about a society that better understands, values, and cares for the ocean. And so everything that we do, and it leads us to that outcome. In terms of the state of ocean literacy, that too, there's been a neat shift. When we first started, as I've noted, like it was fragmented. There was great things happening, but it was happening in pockets. And then by the time we launched the national strategy, there was this emerging kind of excitement and culture around collaborating. But the real push around the time of the strategy launch was around our collective need to socialize ocean literacy. Like, why is it relevant? What's the importance? Where is it going to make a difference? It is, how do we get to that outcome? Because up until then, a lot of work around ocean literacy was seen as fluff, or nice to have. Like, if there's big budgets, if there's any left over, let's put that towards a bit of outreach or science communication or education. But it wasn't seen as like a critically relevant, necessary piece as some of the other efforts and funding focuses within the broad ocean community per se. By 2024, I would say now ocean literacy, its relevance is widely recognized. And I think us as an ocean literacy community, the voice is very active and respected and recognized within the ocean community. And I think that social science, social dynamics piece is, increasingly really becoming more relevant and a key piece. And then lastly, I think, Kolk, in terms of just looking at the narrative arc, and I know I'm spending a bit more time on this slide, but I think it's helpful in the bigger impact story, is, we started as essentially an entity to design and lead that study and to co-develop a strategy. It then shifted to being kind of the entity and project office that would convene and coordinate the joint action and key initiatives to help to advance the strategy. And now it's, really become this hub that's both nationally and internationally recognized as a hub and catalyst for collaboration and research and innovation around ocean literacy. Next slide, please. And so all of this work in many ways, it's a continuous feedback loop. Every week, every initiative, every Ocean Week event, we're learning. We get things right, we get things wrong, like as a community, as a project office, and it's neat to see from national study to strategy and then into like implementing these initiatives alongside actively leading and doing and learning from other research that's happening through the important impact measurement framework that Entremission and our kind of partner team is doing. And then how all of that work here in Canada is feeding into the global ocean literacy movement and pulling Kolk into a leadership role. And to give a tangible example, we were the co-chair and co-author of the Ocean Decade Challenge 10 white paper over the past year, which really laid kind of a blueprint for action around ocean literacy and marine social sciences for the next 5 years in the ocean decade. And all of that work, being able to collaborate and hear critical insights from global ocean literacy leaders, and then to bring that work back into what we're doing now with an updating and refreshed National Strategy 2.0. So it's very much a kind of many, feedback loop that we learn from as we go. Next slide, please. And so here we are, National Strategy 2.0. And, this is an amazing opportunity, as I said at the start, in terms of the intention and purpose for today is a process, to really allow us to reflect on, what's working really well. Where is the momentum? Where are we seeing impact? Where are we feeling kind of palpable, tangible change? And so what do we need to do more of? And then, where are the gaps, the lingering gaps, or what has changed, within the broader landscape that, is impacting the role and the approach to ocean literacy. And I think to create an opportunity to lean into our community for that input. The one thing it's neat to share, though, is that when I look at the difference from 2021 to now, like when we were co-designing together that first strategy, it was a blank canvas. There wasn't another national strategy in the world that we could look at. We knew kind of the direction it had to take based on the findings from the national study, but it was still a bit of a creative, Hail Mary to kind of see like what it would look like. But now we're not starting from scratch. It's not a blank canvas, because between the research and impact measurement, and just community input on an ongoing basis, we know where some momentum is. So we already have a sense of where it's going. But I think now is a great opportunity to see how do we strengthen that collaboration? How do we strengthen opportunities for more collective impact tracking together? And really looking at, where do we want to be in 2030? What will we all look at as a measure of success? So on that note, I'd love to turn it over to Meg, who will kind of kickstart the interactive portion. And I'll just remind when Meg dives into Slido and gets us all set up, for those who, Slido isn't a comfortable or a desired platform, then feel free to use the chat. And we've got Meg S monitoring the chat, as well as any hands that are going up. Over to you, Meg.
I'll be super quick. Some of you are probably familiar with Slido, but for those that aren't, there's two ways to access it. You can either scan this QR code on your phone or go directly to slido.com and just put in this code that's up on the screen. This will also be repeated for every question. So if you miss it now and you join in on another one later, it will appear on each slide. And it is easiest, in my opinion, to use your phone. So I would recommend that if that's an option to you. It will move along to each question as we change the slides. So that will automatically happen on your screen. And questions will take different formats. Some of them are going to be open answers, so you can write in text as long as you want. Other ones are going to be word clouds, which is 1 to 3 words. If people repeat that word, then that word is going to get bigger and bigger. So that'll help you kind of think through what you want to put for those. And then we've got some ranking and multiple choice questions. Back to you, Diz.
Okay, great. And there we go. Or that's what I was needing to see. Thanks, Meg. Fantastic. So for those of you, if you're logged on here and starting to be able to engage with Slido, we should start to see in real time those responses. But really it's this first one, we want to start, we know it was definitely a speed walkthrough over the last 20 minutes of just getting a high level overview of the journey so far and some of the way and how the community looks and the work that's been done and a brief kind of look at impact. But really, if we look at, from 2030, it's easy to be aspirational when we say, where do we want to be in 2030? What does it look like? Often, myself included, we tend to give like an aspirational response. And I think there'll be real value in this updated national strategy if the ambition for 2030 is really tangible and achievable, so that we can actually say in 2030, look, there it is. We've moved that needle. What is that needle or needles, right? And so I think that as a project office team, these are the kind of conversations we're having a lot of right now. And great to start to see, some of the things coming up here. It's moving quick. As it's scrolling so fast, it's hard for me to read here. I'm seeing a lot of things around like, awareness raising, deepening understanding, connections. Absolutely. We know that that is a key piece, and it's what a lot of the ocean literacy community does well. We also know too, though, like, we're at such a critical time in history, like, or a moment of time right now where awareness raising and concern isn't enough. It's essential and we have to keep doing it. But if we stop there, we have not reached that kind of long lasting, sustained change that we need. So part of it is, how do we go from concern to action? Starting to see some things too around like specific to initiatives. So yeah, by 2030, we want all provinces and, major communities, major cities to have Ocean Week Canada events. Absolutely. Yeah, the way people value the ocean. I saw one, I can no longer see it, but there was one around more engagement and interest and kind of attraction of early career and young people into blue economy and job opportunities in the ocean space. Absolutely. Indigenous leadership, decolonization, recognize the ocean spaces. Yes. And a lot of the work too within kind of, again, that oscillating between national and international. There was a lot of discussion in that Challengetown white paper too around that need to recognize the ocean as a living entity. Like, we cannot build that depth of care and that notion of reciprocity if we do not see the ocean as a living entity. So these are great. There's things too. Okay. So a lot of things here. I mean, obviously, what we'll be doing as a project office team is kind of taking this initial wave and looking at it closely. And again, the community input survey that you'll have a link to at the end of today's webinar are the exact same questions. So if you want to think about this more, or things that are popping up are planting seeds, then you'll have time over the next few weeks to think about it and add more. But this is great. Maybe, Meg, we can move to the next. Or I'll let you pace, Slido, because you just tell me when we're moving to the next.
We've still got a few people answering, but we'll move on to the next question. And there is a Q&A that opens up at the end of all of these Slidos. So there's also options to throw in questions, as well as Diz mentioned, that survey.
Oh, just before we do move, I just love one I saw pop up there is around the convergence of literacies. Like, we silo so much, and I love, that is so key right now. And for many on the call right now, I'm sure there may be an awareness that Environment Climate Change Canada has been in a process over this last year around creating a national framework for environmental literacy specific to formal education. So it's a much narrower kind of framework or strategy compared to, we're looking at ocean literacy across sectors and generational, lifelong. But that just reiterated how we silo things, right? Like climate literacy, environment literacy, ocean literacy, all these different things. And yet they are absolutely all interconnected in the whole ocean climate nexus. and looking at global citizenship and reconciliation, and all these important priorities all converge, and really great to see these showing up here. Okay, Meg, next slide. Okay. This one here, we're really keen to just see, those are initial national strategy, 3 goals: ocean knowledge, ocean values, ocean action, to see, 3 years later, did they still resonate? And are we wanting kind of a national strategy that's built around 3 goals that reflect kind of dimensions of ocean literacy? Or is this an opportunity to pick one ambition, one goal that we're really going to all rally around? And who knows, but this is kind of a first step of insight from the community. So action, yeah, good to see. So it's, first pulse check here is all of them seem to continue to resonate and be important, which is great. And they're not linear. It's not like knowledge and then we move to values, and then we move to action. Although we know that with deeper understanding and those emotional connections that are built, that is what then becomes the motivation and kind of catalyst and desire for people to build those the capacity or skills needed to then take it to action. So there is a bit of a sequential flow, but they also, are circuitous and kind of interconnected. But agreed that action, I think we feel internally as a project office, Strategy 2.0 has to really be focused on action. Okay, great to see. Let's keep her rolling. So this question, we're totally mindful that even within this webinar community today and in the much broader 450 plus community, people have leaned in on different scales and in different ways, all important. But how that we may answer this question is different based on familiarity or engagement in key initiatives. So mindful of kind of the broad scope of engagement and awareness of all the different key initiatives that exist to date. What are we seeing as kind of real bright spots from the efforts over the last 3 years? Great to see. Yeah. I'll take a moment too, just as more are popping up here. ECOP, yeah, the work of the early career ocean professionals node in Canada, and the 3 founding co-chairs, Neha, Ronnie, and Sam, that kickstarted that and really started to mobilize the early career community in Canada. It was fantastic. And organizations, there's so many, from OceanWise to SOI Foundation to so many organizations that are youth focused and leading incredible initiatives that help to kind of mobilize and bring early career people into ocean conversations and spaces have been really critical over the last 3 years and beyond. Okay, seeing some great stuff. Research is popping up a lot. Collaboration is many places. That's awesome. I love that just people's in there for sure. Because, at the end of the day, ocean literacy, and I think those who are drawn to that work and that space and the marine social sciences and the social dynamic elements of the ocean space, it's all about people. It's not the data. Like it's not the science as essential as science is. It's about people and relationships and connection. So it's really neat to see that here. Okay. And before we move to the next slide, or as we move to the next slide, Meg, Meg S, just checking in with you to see if there's anything in the chat that you wanted to bring to attention, or are we
I know
rolling?
that we have a question, but I think that can wait until our Q&A point. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, awesome. So now is a chance to get a sense, like all those key initiatives, and again, mindful that people's familiarity or intimacy with each one of these varies greatly, but we'd love to get a sense of these initiatives that are, and keep in mind, these are all national in scope and collaborative in nature, and hence why these are the ones we're locking in on. We're totally mindful that there's absolutely really important regional based initiatives. They're having huge impact. But how we deciphered, or the ones we focused on today, are the ones that are national in scope and multiple partners and cross-sectoral. So what are we seeing as kind of the top three or more that we know for sure we want to keep going with?
And it looks like most people are figuring it out, but just so everyone knows, you have to click them and that brings them above to your list, and then you can kind of slide them around and reorder them after the fact.
It's so fun seeing this in real time. And it's not surprising and also great to see. I mean, we anticipate Ocean Week Canada would be up there. It's the one most known, and obviously we saw by those social network analysis visualizations that it is by far where our most partners are congregating around. But the grants, it's awesome to see that's number two. We are hoping kind of see because there's been an overwhelming response around our grants program. And even though of the 10 million raised to date, like only a small fraction has gone to the grants. It is clear with every call out, the number of applications you get per dollar we have to give out. We know this is an area that needs to grow. Great to see Blue Schools, ECOP, research. Okay, fantastic. Shall we shift gears, Meg? All right. So this is kind of as I noted, we're aware that there's so much other essential work that's happening, really important, impactful work happening. And that isn't being captured, like it's not being captured in the sense we know there's an awareness that it's happening, and there's definitely a lot of amplifying and holding it up as bright spots within the broader ocean literacy narrative in Canada. But in terms of tracking it within the impact measurement program and building it into the actual strategy measurement, we're not capturing it. Partly because that way we thought we might, in the early days in 2021, that opt-in kind of way where people could self-identify, here we're leading this initiative, opt in and kind of put it into the impact tracking. It just hasn't happened, and there's lots of different reasons for. So that's one thing we're trying to figure out more with 2.0. So really keen here to see what else people are seeing as true bright spots with impact, either regionally or nationally across the country. All right. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all these things, good to see. There is a lot of stuff happening in collaborations that are cross-sectoral. I'm imagining when someone put then the OSC is at Ocean Supercluster, looking at and wondering maybe the question there is around collaboration with COLC. To date, with the COLC project office, nothing formally directly. Definitely a good communication kind of working relationship, but there are big initiatives that are absolutely advancing the national strategy. And I'll just pull out, for example, Blue Futures Pathway, led by the SOI Foundation. That is a supercluster funded initiative that very much advances youth engagement and kind of that talent pipeline in the blue career spaces. So there's examples like that. Yeah, and I love to see that someone's noted here Northern and Arctic focus. There's no question there's important work, with Inuit knowledge system, Inuit epistemology, and just the leadership too with Indigenous-led conservation and work being done in the North. There's so much bright spots. However, that's another area that in terms of kind of the community and key initiatives and impact tracking to date, it's a gap. So it's the disconnect. It's not because there isn't great work happening. There's a gap in how we're feeding that into being able to share those stories and that work and that impact to a broader audience. And that's the same, I would say, too, within the industry sector. We saw back in that visualization, there are, a couple, I think there was 36 or so industry partners that have really leaned into various key initiatives, but we're not seeing, and we know there's so much innovation and and really neat things happening within that space that are involving early career or kind of dissemination into communities or building bridges with communities. It's just an inability or a capacity gap right now to capture it all, or a mechanism with which to do that. So great to see, yeah, the different things coming up here. All right. Let's move to what I believe, Meg, is the last question. And so around those gaps, I mean, I've been kind of noting a few here that, we are aware of within the project office, but yeah, really keen, especially with this diverse group that we have on today's webinar. What are you seeing from your organizational lens or regional lens, or expertise lens? What are those gaps? Yeah, not surprising to see big red funding in the middle. I'm going to just note on the distance from ocean. That's it. It's a great one that comes up. We've making those inland connections. Initially in that process of socializing ocean literacy and the relevance, right away people kind of move to like, well, it's really about for those people who are on the coast or that physical connection to the ocean. And yet, arguably most of the socializing had to be done with the three quarters, the more than 30 million Canadians that live nowhere near the ocean, and to really advocate for the relevancy of ocean literacy and recognizing that ocean literacy, as was, I think, well outlined in that kind of introductory pages of the initial national strategy, that when we say ocean literacy here in Canada, it's recognizing it as a continuum from our local waterways and the five, ocean basins that flow out to the sea. Because for most people in Canada, they're not going to care or value or take action for the ocean without having those connections to the local waterways, or it's through the local waterways that they're going to make an impact on future ocean health or current ocean health. So I'm glad that was noted. So many good things here. Yeah. And it's a confluence of all of all of these things, but it's an affirmation that there is lots more work to be done, despite the achievements and progress and scale of collaboration and I think impact to date that we can all as a community be proud of. There's still so much more to do, and in many ways, kind of this milestone in the start of shaping National Strategy 2.0, it's like this is really just the beginning. Now we kind of really roll up our sleeves because now we've tested what's working, what's not, and really it's like, how do we move towards that long-lasting, real, sustained change? All right. So Meg, what we'll do is maybe we can go, to this last slide here. And Meg S, I'll come back to you in a moment around if there's anything that came up in the chat that we want to take a few minutes. And we're actually moving along really well time-wise. This is great, although I'm sure everyone's seat back because this has been one speed trip over the last 45 minutes. But there's a few just in terms of next steps we wanted to share. That QR code takes you to the survey version, online survey version of the same questions we just explored in Slido. And that will stay open until February 7th. We will be sharing it out by kind of MailChimp to the wider community, but would love any kind of deeper reflections since you guys were part of this initial conversation this morning or an afternoon to lean in. It's also a QR code and link that you can share out to your community. So out to your network. The wider, the more people leaning in and diverse voices, absolutely. So that's the intention of this input survey, to gather as much as we can to shape direction. And we'll keep that open to February 7th. At the bottom of the survey is, for any of those who will be completing it, there is an opportunity to sign up for, express interest in one of these 6 more focused consultations. that'll be taking place throughout February. And these are going to be 90-minute virtual discussions, not a webinar like this where it's half presentation, but 90 minutes that's shaped around 1 to 3 maximum questions or topic areas that, leaders within that area that's been identified here will come together. We're looking for smaller groups, so it can be really a deep dive discussion, perhaps maybe 10 to 20, people we're looking at, and to really explore some of those key initiatives, key priority areas that we know we got to keep moving forward with, and then ways to improve and strengthen collaboration, shared funding opportunities, collective impact tracking. So take a deeper dive than what we explore in the survey. So if any of these or multiple are jumping out at you, then just the way you can sign up or express interest is through the input survey. And then sometime in April is when we look to share a draft of the national strategy that revised out to the community. And as we did with the first one, kind of an iterative process where we can then strengthen and tighten it up based on reviewers' input. So keep that in mind. That's another role if you're interested as we head into the spring. And then the hope will be to launch the refreshed national strategy in time for Ocean Week Canada 2025. So we recognize it's a quick timeline, but on the flip side, we're not starting from scratch, as I noted before, right? We're refreshing, we're updating, we're building on what's working and strengthening where some holes remain. So, all right, Meg, let's turn over to you for any kind of comments or questions that have appeared in the chat, or an opportunity for hands to go up if there's any questions about things shared or that haven't been shared.
Marie Chantal Ross, I believe it was during the SNA portion of the presentation, asked how are these determined, what constitutes community, non-government, and arts and culture. Meg had commented that it possibly could have been that they self-identified, but is there anything that you wanted to add to that, Diz?
It's a great question, Marie Chantal. Thanks. And that first wave of SNA, social network analysis work that we did, came from what we have internally, right? So when we have our partner list and are working with people, it may be in conversation or through the way they're contributing to impact measurement to date, that they said, we're part of this, we identify as being part of this sector, or it's us from our own internal lens saying we see these partners as being part of this sector exclusively or crossover between these two sectors. So it was more, I would say, from how the project office team kind of identified, but in some cases where those partners self-identified. But what's interesting with the question you asked is looking ahead, the second wave of research we want to do specific to social network analysis this year is to then collect data and input directly from the partner side. So not how we see it, but how they see it. Because that would perhaps change the configuration and the visualization quite differently. So, and this National Strategy 2.0 refresh is starting that process, right? As we gather kind of input from the partners, we'll be able to follow up with partners around these kind of additional questions, which will allow them to then lean in to share how they're seeing it from their end. Looks like you got a follow-up question, Marie Chantal. Go for it.
I do. It was more of it might be good when you go out to those people to have very clear definitions of what this means. Because looking at that, like, what is the difference between one versus another? And we all live in community. So anyway, just so that we're all very clear on what that means. I think that might be helpful even in answering.
And you were speaking specifically to the sector slide, correct? That cross section? Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah, we do have another question in the chat here from Nick Hammer. I know you mentioned it, but could you repeat how people can be involved in the consultations?
Yeah. So these 6 focused consultation virtual discussions that'll take place in February. At the bottom of the input survey, so the QR code there leads you to the community input survey, which again is the same 6 questions we explored today. At the bottom of that input survey will be an invitation for anyone who's completed that survey to express interest to join one or more of these targeted conversations. And so we'll then take that list and follow up with those people with more details.
So thank you. So just to clarify, we just filled out those questions in this call here, but in order to sign up for the consultation, we need to fill it out again online, or?
Yeah, Nick, we decided to put them partly because we didn't want to have it just like a completely wide open public on the website where anyone can show up. Because then they may not have been involved in any of the process to date. However, if you've already leaned into these questions and you feel like, you know what, I offered my insights today, nothing further to share, just go into that input survey, just enter your name up at the top, and then just move down to the bottom there where it has, and you can express interest there. Thanks, Nick.
For anyone here, I can also send a more direct link if that's of interest, if that's easier to register. We would love for you to please answer the survey because we'd love more of your insights as you take time to sit back and reflect on the discussions today. But if, as Nick said, you feel like you've kind of given all of your insights, then you can directly register here.
And I see, Ken, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm having problems with the buttons here. So I see on the slide there that you have like the dates and you have an Indigenous-led groups for this consultation. Like, how's that going to work?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. So if your question, is it for that one specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've started just initially in the last just couple of weeks, starting to reach out to those Indigenous partners, Indigenous-led groups and partners who've been part of either one of the key initiatives or who serve another role or who are part of the initial national strategy development process, and starting to reach out individually to each of those people to see if they're interested. The challenge is the timing, right? Like to try and get everyone together on a certain date at a certain time, as you know better than anyone can, is the challenge. So as we're reaching out, that focus discussion is one time away, but we're also co-identifying with those individuals and groups and organizations what are other ways best for them to share insights and lean in. So that process is just starting now. So it's evolving as we go. But it's with people who their relationship and engagement to date's established. So again, not starting from scratch, which is, I think, really important. They're also able to lean in because they've been involved to date. So been able to see like from their important lens too, right? Like what's working well and is a benefit to their organizations, to their communities, to the goals and ambitions like that they're trying to advance within their own work. So each one has been kind of an individual conversation just starting. But we'll be looping back with you shortly.
Okay, just a quick follow-up then about the strategy itself. So really what you're looking for in the strategy are sort of like the broad, important initiatives, and that the details of implementation will come at a later date. Is that how this is going to work?
It's such a good question, Ken. It's, at the end of the day, a strategy is just a document.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we all know that, like, whether it actually, it's the scale to which there's uptake and the actioning of, and the kind of the way that document becomes a catalyst or a blueprint to mobilize people around. Very similar to what we did with Challenge 10. That's the trick. And so I think that's one of the questions we're looking to right now to do a deep dive within those focus consultations next month is how should this updated national strategy be structured or organized in a way that might be different than the first one, so that it helps serve the very role that you're speaking, right? That it becomes like kind of a direct on-ramp to go to actioning. and I don't have like, I'll be honest, we don't have the answer. There's the few things we're experimenting with, trying to see. We're also looking at other strategies and implementation plans and which ones have actually got, real legs in terms of tangible action and impact. So all ears.
Okay. Okay. Okay, that's all I have for now.
No, thanks. Great. All right.
One question that's come in from the Slido Q&A.
Yeah.
How much of a role does fundraising need to have in the new strategy? How much of the 10 million is left or will be used for implementation?
Great question. And seeing how big funding was in the word cloud, it's not surprising that question's come in. Yeah, so the funding to advance the key initiatives under the current national strategy is in place until March of 2026. So into the last 15 months of funding that was raised during the first phase. So one of the main roles for me personally, as executive director of COLC and just for the project office itself, is to, we are in the process right now of mapping out funding streams for the next phase of work from 2026 to 2030. And yeah, in many ways, I think an updated strategy, if done well, and I think if done in the way that Ken, aptly asked in terms of being a real framework for action. If that's done well, and there's kind of a clear ambition and clear pathway to get there, and a clear way that the partner community is moving towards, and we're able to track to that impact together, it becomes a really good case for fundraising, or a tool for fundraising. So yeah, it all interconnects here. But on the funding note, because we definitely believe in transparency and certainly share open all reports are up on the COLC community website. But of the 10 million raised to date, just shy of 7 million has gone out to partner organizations and community groups. Just over 1 million, I think it's 1.1 and change, has gone to directly supporting early career opportunities and initiatives. So provide core funding for for ECOP Canada's chapter, having ECOP early career internships, both research and communication focused, as well as travel stipends for ECOPs to be part of and leading delegations and opportunities at conferences. I think about 150,000 to date has gone into the community microgrant program, which is more than we had initially put into the funding proposal. So we're trying to put as much as we can. And then approximately 2 million has gone to the staff and operations and core deliverables within the project office team, which when we started in 2021, launched of the strategy, we were 2 staff, and we are now 8 full-time staff spread across the country. And also just a shout out as we enter our last minute here, none of this work too would be possible with an incredible project office team, but also our administrative homes. And so for the first phase of the national strategy implementation from 2021 until this last spring, we were nested at Ocean Networks Canada at the University of Victoria, who played an instrumental role as our administrative home. And since April, we have been based at Ocean Frontier Institute at Dalhousie University. And again, none of this work and certainly looking ahead could be done without having such fantastic admin institutions. So mindful of time, we're at 1 o'clock. Certainly the core team here will staying on for a few more minutes, but if I just want to formally take again a note to say, thanks, a sincere thanks from me personally and the team for taking a time. I know to set aside an hour of the day to hear kind of an update and to lean in. Really grateful, and certainly hope that over the coming few weeks, in the next couple months, your organization, the work that you do on the ground in the regions and through the lenses and expertise and capacity that you have, is really, really vital to shaping, I think, this next iteration of a national strategy and to get towards tangible impact and results in 2030.